But first, let's just start with a simple definition. What is a passport, bro? In your
Okay, so
eyes?
there's kind of two definitions I've seen. For me, the definition is you are going to a place where there is little middle class, maybe like poverty. So you have a high level of poverty and a disproportionately high level of attractive women. So the three main places I would think about this is Colombia, probably Ukraine in that area. So like maybe Romania, that area, parts of Poland, and then Southeast Asia. So maybe like Singapore or places like that. Well, Singapore's not poor, but like certain poorer places like Vietnam would be an example.
Yeah.
So basically, places where you will also see sex tourism. So where you see sex tourism, you're also going to see passport bros. A guy who's like, for instance, Hispanic going to Australia, and then all the Australian girls like, ooh, you look different than our guys, and they want to have sex with them. That's not a passport bro to me. Just going like a guy who goes to a first world country, like for instance, you grab your passport and you go to Sweden because you want a blonde haired, blue eyed woman that you want to date. Those people have a middle class. And so those women are not going to be able, are not going to just up and leave for a green card like they might do in Medellin or they might do in you know, Ho Chi Minh City or whatever. Like it's very different environment. So to me, my definition for passport bro is you're going to a place with almost no middle class where women have very little upward financial mobility and a disproportionately high level of attractive women.
That's a fantastic definition because every now and then I get accused of being a passport bro. And I know we haven't spoken too much prior to just getting on here, but I lived in Mexico years ago, almost 20 years ago. I studied abroad down here, studied at a very good university, didn't realize it at the time. Did my corporate career thing in California, got locked down in the pandemic, and then decided, you know what, I'll just come back to Mexico because I'm already pretty well established here. I have a good network of people, and it's never really felt foreign to me. But the passport bro thing didn't exist 20 years ago when I first came down. So now I run into other gringos or other expats, and they'll say, oh, you're one of those passport bro guys. I'm like, dude, I've been doing Mexico since before Google existed. I don't know what you're talking about. So I love that idea of that it has the very small middle class and then that income disparity. I think that's a key factor. And then even where I'm at in Mexico City, I'm in a pretty nice neighborhood. You don't really see sex tourism. Most of the girls I date are usually actually, to be honest, higher class than I am. A lot of times as a gringo, you come down thinking, oh, I'm gonna have the ladies swooning over me, and then you get going out with them. You're like, no, they come from better families than I do even. So What would the difference be in your eyes between, for example, a passport bro, an expat, and a digital nomad?
So yeah, a digital nomad who goes to Tulum. Tulum's more fucking expensive than the United States. That's definitely not a passport bro. And most of the girls you'd be hooking up with there are either American or fucking European that are visiting Tulum. So that's when I see digital nomads, the number one spot for me I see is Tulum, like Mexico City. I'll see them sometimes in Medellin or like maybe Dubai or places like that. You'll see it maybe Sweden, sometimes Puerto Rico because of the 4% federal tax rate. You'll see places like that. That is just a function where you just want to travel and you can live anywhere you want. So you choose to do that. To me, by the way, any digital nomad who doesn't live in Vegas, I just don't understand why. It's better here than any of those places I just mentioned. So that's the first thing. The expat is, again, it's for financial gain. So for instance, the Emiratis, the royal family in the Emirates, their family members actually fly the fighter jets that the the UAE, United Arab Emirates royal family owns. So they actually have an air force in UAE. The guys who maintain those jets are usually former U.S. Air Force, U.S. Air Force maintainers, and those guys get paid $400,000 a year to go work on jets and maintain them in another country. A lot of people have these cool jobs where they work on oil rigs, or they might work as, they just have like maybe even an English teacher. There's a bunch of different cool jobs that you can get in other countries where you're an expat, or you may just like live in like Koh Samui, Thailand, where it's super, super inexpensive to live. You know what I'm saying? Maybe you have like a couple $100,000 saved up and you realize you can just live there for the rest of your life because there's an arbitrage in wealth. That's what an expat would do. A passport bro is different. A passport bro is a situation where it's like, your initial reasoning for leaving is because the women in this country are not facilitating what you want. And that could be like, again, it's realistic. Are women getting bad advice from Cardi B and Megan Thee Stallion to be a bad bitch and be like extremely difficult to deal with? Yes, that's true for sure. Are modern Western women very, difficult to lock down and have a long-term relationship with? Yes, the science, the data would show that is correct. And then from that, your personal anecdotal experience shows you, okay, well, I'm not having a ton of a success with dating, so let me go to this other place. And then you say, well, these people have more traditional values. But the problem is you can go to places with more traditional values, but those women still aren't going to fuck you. But in Colombia, they will. You know what I'm saying? And in places like that, they will. And so that's the issue. It's like there needs to be this added incentive. And I think we kind of ignore this. There's an incentive for the woman to have a better life by leaving with the dude who has a more upward financial mobility and a U.S. passport. And so that's what's going on there. And I think to act like that's not going on is naive, right? That is part of this whole thing. Does even the guy who was promoting Passport Fellas, which is the app, on my show yesterday, he even admitted, he's like, yeah, there probably is some sex trafficking going on with regards to this. And that's one of the dangers that are going on. It's like one of these situations where Colombia is poor. No matter what we do, Colombia is going to be poor. The women there, no, the situation they're in is that they're going to be in a better situation if they do this than don't do this. So are you trafficking? Yes. But like the thing is, well, someone was going to do it anyway, so it might as well be us. And these guys want to look for a good wife and yada, yada, yada. I have a buddy of mine who lives there, and he like only dates super young girls, like 19, 20-year-old girls in Colombia, because he goes, once they get to 21, if they're hot and they don't have a job, they're kind of like forced into this like sex trade, and it's really bad at that point. So he's like, dude, you got to get them young. That's what he told me. I'm not advising anyone do this, but he lives in Medellin. And so from that standpoint, that's essentially what I'm saying is like, for those of you who say I'm not in favor of passport bros, I'm not. I actually think it's kind of a cope. If it gets to an actual point where it's like you just really want a Catholic girl and you're really into Hispanic women and you are legitimately looking for a wife, and in the interim you don't fuck 15 prostitutes, then I could definitely see that like as maybe being the case. Going to another country to find someone better, hey, that makes sense. But like what I will say, the majority of the passport bro thing is it's a cope. You want cheap prostitutes, you go to other countries to find them, then you fuck them, and then occasionally you might bring one home. But when you do, she didn't really have any other options but to leave with you. That's the majority of it. I'm not saying it's 100%, but that is what the majority of is. Again, these guys who are in Colombia talking about, hey, I built a harem in Colombia and let me teach you how. I'm very, very skeptical of that shit, and I would not take that course.
Yeah, I'm in Mexico City, and I find that my dating life, granted, there is a bit of an uptick just because you have the whole foreign thing. I live in a nice neighborhood. There is that financial arbitrage, but Mexico City's getting expensive too. In the area I live, it's cheaper than California, but it's about where California was 10, 15 years ago. It's not like a Colombia. It's not like a Thailand. And I've noticed that a lot of gringos come in and out of here. They don't usually last long, and they come with that mindset, okay, just by virtue of being a foreigner, I'm going to just be rolling in pussy. And that's not usually how it works. I've found that personally, but my dating life somewhere else,
they will.
Yeah.
If they go somewhere, these other places, they will. Yeah.
Yeah. I've been to Colombia before, but in Colombia, you always have to watch your back, and you will meet these beautiful girls, or you'll go to a club, say you're vibing her, you're having a good conversation. I speak Spanish, by the way. I went to college down here in Mexico, and you think you're having a legit pull or a legit interaction, and then it's time to go home, and she says something like, "Oh, $100," or "Oh, hey, it's going to cost you," and you're like, "What are you talking about? You thought this was a legit conversation." I've noticed that doesn't happen too much where I live in Mexico, but there are plenty of guys, as you mentioned, that do come down here. They think it's going to be an easy time, and you do have that exception, as you alluded to. When I was in college down here, I went to a private school, so a lot of religious guys came down. They started dating a girl in college, spent their whole time there, and then took the girl back to their home country. And they're still married to this day, but that's a very small exception. I think a lot of guys come abroad.
There are millions of people that brought somebody back from Vietnam or South Korea. That happened. Like I'm not discounting that. These people were in love, and that's not what I'm saying. What I'm talking about is the extreme example of the people who go to those fucking bars where there's girls like, fucking for $150 and then claiming to be passport bros to like try to find a good wife. If you're going like there's a difference between passport bros and sex tourism, but a lot of people who are claiming to be passport bros are actually sex tourists.
There's a lot of overlap too. I know I see that you have an armed services background, so I'm sure you've done plenty of traveling to all sorts of countries, good and bad and everything in between. And there's a class system in a lot of these countries. So you'll get a lot of guys that come in, a lot of the new foreigners fresh over the border, so to speak. Sometimes it's weird considering myself a foreigner, but you'll see that there are the gringo bars where the gringos go there. They don't have to speak any Spanish, and there are girls there looking for gringos, and they do kind of straddle that line. Maybe it's not explicitly sex tourism, but it's the lower class of girls. So, and you see guys this happens to them all the time. I went out with some buddies last night where poor guy, not really experienced, doesn't really have a much kind of dating experience in the US. And, oh, I met this really cool girl. And then turns out other foreigners are kind of passing the girl around. So I always make sure in my group of friends, we're kind of more game aware, but one part of our conversation, we'll pull out our phones like, hey, I'm talking to this girl. I see you follow her. Is anyone fucking around with her? Is she a communal girl? What kind of girl is she? And we just want to make sure. Yeah. We call them the community chicks. In college, we used to call them the house hoes. Like if you're ever in a frat or anything, the girls that they're always there and they're just kind of with whoever's around at that point. In your estimation, is there a specific profile of a passport bro? Because I've always heard that if you can't do well dating wise in the US, you probably shouldn't go abroad. I would definitely agree with that. I did well in California. I do a little better in Mexico just because the girls are a little more feminine and there's more of that dichotomy between male, female kind of relationships and roles that are played in relationships. But for the most part, I found that it wasn't until my game got good in the US that I could really start doing some damage abroad.
Yes. Listen, is there a point at which you're just not having any success and you might want to try going to another place? I agree with that. But my point is, here's the analogy. Have you ever met the guys in pickup who do day game all the time, just day game in the fucking mall all the time? And then you ask them, hey, do you want to go to a nightclub? And they don't want to go to a nightclub because it's too loud. It's like, if you're doing day game because it's an added part of your life or something you're trying to explore, that's fine. If you're doing day game because you're afraid of going to a nightclub, that's a cope. You're using it as a crutch and you're not getting any better with women. It's the same type of situation here. Like if it's a situation where you've tried everything, you met a bunch of girls, they're just all disloyal, but you do understand attraction triggers. You do understand how to maintain boundaries. You understand how to break rapport. You understand how to create dread. You understand how pre-selection works. You understand how to be a leader of men. You understand these concepts in order to trigger attraction in women, and you're still dissatisfied, and then you want to go find a wife somewhere else, totally fine with that. But that's not mostly what I see. That's not mostly what I see. What I see is guys who are overweight, who could definitely lose the weight, guys that are, poor, who could definitely do things to improve their financial stability. And those are the ones that are going to these other countries for basically, financial arbitrage or dating arbitrage. And that's what's going on.